Welcome back. You're listening to The Voice of Russia in London. I'm James Reinl with a special show about developments on the agitated Korean peninsula. It looks good on paper, at the very least. A recently struck deal between North Korea and the United States could be the answer to a troubling nuclear weapons stalemate. The plan will see Washington provide 240,000 tons of free food, while Pyongyang suspends uranium enrichment and stops some weapons tests. Too good to be true? Possibly, but it comes only months after the death of North Korea's hardline leader Kim Jong-il and the dynastic handover to his 20-something progeny, Kim Jong-un. So, is this the start of a détente or more of the same? What does it bode for this month's nuclear security summit in South Korea? And what have we learned about handling North Korea, Iran, and other suspected nuclear rogues? To probe these questions, we're hosting a debate in our London studios. I'm joined by Mark Fitzpatrick from a research group called the International Institute for Strategic Studies, Jim Hoare, a former British envoy to Pyongyang, Jonas Parello-Plesner from a think tank called the European Council on Foreign Relations, and on the line from Moscow by Alexandr Djebin, a Korea expert at the Russian Academy of Sciences. Okay, to get the ball rolling today, I want to get an answer to this simple question in one sentence from each of you. Is this a breakthrough deal? Mark?
It's a good deal because many analysts, myself included, had thought that North Korea would be testing both nuclear weapons and missiles later this year. The fact that they've agreed to a moratorium on that and on the uranium enrichment facility, the one that they've declared, not the ones that they haven't declared. So it's not perfect, but that's a good start. Okay, Jim, a surprise deal?
It's a start. It's got problems, but you have to begin somewhere. So I think it's a welcome development.
Jonas?
Positive start from Kim Jong-un, but still really only the beginning of negotiations, and many of the troubles ahead are well known in negotiation earlier with North Korea.
And Alexander?
Very modest but very important step which gives time to both sides for North Korea to safely celebrate 100th anniversary of Kim Il-sung's birthday, and for United States to have some assurances that North Korea wouldn't do anything if United States decide to attack Iran or Syria.
Okay, well, seeing as we've got a kind of muted reception to the plan, perhaps we'll go to Jim and you can explain why you think it's a good deal, but why you think there are problems ahead inherent in it.
I think it's a good deal because it is getting the two main protagonists, United States and North Korea, together again round the table. I don't think anything is solved when they're not talking to each other, so that's important in itself. It also helps, I think, that they get to know each other a bit better. And the Obama administration is now apparently really engaging with North Korea. Given the problems, the nuclear issue, the missiles, the uncertainty on the peninsula, this is good, this is positive, to be welcomed. But of course the problems are still there. North Korea is a tough negotiator. It doesn't give things up easily. Even if there was complete goodwill on both sides, they are very far apart, and there will be problems that come up as you go along. There's bound to be. And so it's a step forward, but it's not yet the solution. Maybe there is no solution.
Mark, about 3 years ago, Robert Gates, who was then America's defense secretary, he warned that these deals with North Korea, he said that he was tired of buying the same horse twice. Can you give us a feel for what he was talking about and this suspicion from an American perspective about North Korea?
Well, the Americans had repeatedly negotiated and agreed to deals with North Korea to pay North Korea to stop nuclear activity. First, in the 1994 agreed framework, under which North Korea was to have agreed to give up its nuclear weapons program and send out of the country the plutonium that it had produced. The United States was to have supplied light water reactors. That all came to naught. A couple other times, 2005, a very good deal on paper, denuclearization agreement. North Korea abrogated that deal after the incidents in 2009 when it tested a missile, then a weapon, then sanctions were applied and so forth. But I agree with Jim. You've got to start somewhere, and suspending activity is a good place to start.
Okay, and Jonas, you were broadly positive about it as well. Do you think it could lead to something like a resumption of the six-party talks?
No, I mean, that's definitely a possibility. Several of the partners around the table, particularly China, would of course like to see North Korea sort of reined into talks. And the Americans have been a bit more lukewarm on that and saying, of course, that demands further positive steps from the North Koreans. Although, of course, opening the bilateral track with the Americans is, I think, also really part of what the North Koreans would like to see, is having those negotiations go on again.
Alexander, when I asked you the first question, you saw it in a much broader context as well. You were talking about Iran and other countries too. Were you suggesting that when it comes to North Korea, what we're dealing with is a case of America exercising its might and muscle on the world stage again, perhaps unfairly?
I think that Obama administration, which pursued strategic patience policy towards North Korea, suddenly changed course and decided to have a deal with North Korea. What was the reason for such drastic change? Because no agreements and actually no talks for almost 4 years. I should suggest that there is something more broader, more important strategic considerations are involved than generally Korean situation was on a backstage during all the term of the Obama administration. So I should suggest that maybe if the United States will embark on a new war in the Middle East without approving of Security Council, and North Korea will use the moment, will consider it appropriate to make another missile launch or nuclear test, how United States will ask Security Council to condemn North Korea action when maybe 1 month or several weeks before it will ignore Security Council launching the war against Iran or Syria. In that case, North Korea will be absolutely unpunishable in that case, and the consequences for situation in East Asia may be very, very catastrophic, I would say. So for the United States, this deal mostly, it seems to me, have more general strategic international implications than just the deal with North Korea, because North Korea already for 3 years didn't make any missile launches, didn't make any nuclear tests, and these facilities in Yongbyon, which Zygmunt Hecker visited in November 2010, he is sure that this facility, at least for the time being, entirely for this light water reactor which North Koreans have started to build. I just don't see any serious reason for United States to change the course in Korean affairs.
Well, I can understand the point that Alexander is making. He's saying that if the United States elsewhere in the world takes actions that create disharmony among the permanent members of the Security Council, that is to say, if the United States and Iran get involved in a war, or Syria, and Russia objects to that, then the United States cannot easily turn to the Security Council for support in dealing with a North Korean situation. One problem in that argument is that in the past, the United States has often had trouble getting the Security Council involved in North Korea, frankly, because China won't allow it. It's true that North Korea did the last nuclear test was 2009, but let's remember the serious provocations that North Korea started in 2010. The attack on a South Korean ship that killed 50 sailors, the attack on a South Korean island that killed a couple civilians as well as 2 military officials. And the Security Council couldn't do anything about that because Russia wouldn't allow them to. I don't mean to turn this into a criticism of Russia. Let's look forward. And I think that the United States didn't have to make a lot of sacrifices here. 240 tons of nutritional assistance. You know, they could do it in and of itself. It's good because you've got starving people in North Korea. And the fact that they also were able to get a deal out of North Korea to stop activities that were threatening all of its neighbors and the wider non-proliferation regime, it's a good deal. And I think the United States and Russia and China, Japan and South Korea can all work together now more cooperatively to address some of the fundamental issues that need to be addressed.
And I think Jonas wanted to come in as well.
We could see even the other way around, that the U.S. actually with this offers a signal to Iran that negotiations do work and do come back to the negotiation table if you're ready to make a deal. So you could also see it as a other type of signal, actually much more sort of benign, one of saying these discussions over nuclear weapons do not have to lead at all to conflict and war, but we're now starting negotiations again with North Korea. And so Iran could also see that as a signal of possibilities.
Does anybody think that Barack Obama could do with a foreign policy success as we head up to the American presidential elections as well?
Hooray, yes. He needs all the success he can get.
I think that's right, that there are other factors involved in all this, that North Korea, as Alexander said, wants a peaceful environment, at least to get through the establishment of the new leader, and it also wants to see April and the events of April pass off in a benign way. So it therefore has a motive to engage. I think the United States, yes, there is a presidential election coming up. There are other problems, as Mark and Alexander have indicated, that need to be addressed. But this is one that, for a relatively small amount, as you say, of food aid, the American government has been able to, at least for the moment, get it back on track. There's also the South Korean election coming up, and that is another wild card in the whole thing. I mean, the present president can't stand again, but he does want to influence the way the election goes. So he has a stake in all this, and although not party to the agreement between the United States and the DPRK, the South Koreans are certainly very interested in what is done and how it's done. So you have all these factors, I think, to throw into the game.
DPRK, that's North Korea, isn't it? Democratic People's Republic of Korea.
Yes.
Do you want to see the world in all of its diversity? Listen to one of the oldest radio stations in the world, the Voice of Russia, and you'll gain a comprehensive understanding of the most important world events.
You're listening to the Voice of Russia in London. I'm James Reinl, and we're discussing nuclear weapons and North Korea. I'm joined by Mark Fitzpatrick from a research group called the International Institute for Strategic Studies, Jonas Parello-Plesner from a think tank called the European Council on Foreign Relations, Jim Hoare, a former British envoy to Pyongyang, and on the line from Moscow by Alexandr Djebin, a Korea expert at the Russian Academy of Sciences. I want to stay with North Korea for a bit longer because we've looked at it in terms of what it's seen from the outside set of eyes, but we're a couple of months into the leadership of Kim Jong-un. Very little was known about him before. We know that he could be about 28 years old. We know that he went to school in Switzerland. And I think we also know that he likes, is it basketball? It's basketball, isn't it?
Yeah.
And do we know anything more now, 7-8 weeks later? Maybe Jim first, because you're such a Korea watcher.
I still don't know very much about the young man. He has started, at least from the public persona, in a very different way from his father, who, after the death of Kim Il-sung in 1994, somewhat ostentatiously withdrew from the world, fulfilling the requirements of Confucian mourning, perhaps. But the new leader has been very much in the public eye in terms of visiting particularly military establishments and things associated with the military, like the Mangyongdae Revolutionary School. So that's something perhaps that shows there is a different personality in operation, a different person from his father. Beyond that, we really don't know very much about him still. The fact that he went to school in Switzerland, I suspect, is a little like the Duke of Wellington being born in Ireland. It didn't make him Irish, just as he said, being born in a stable didn't make you a horse. So all we know is that he was a little bit exposed to the West, but he is, after all, a child of the North Korean elite, and a lot of children of the North Korean elite are educated abroad. Most diplomats' children do have at least some education abroad. It doesn't stop them fitting in when they get back home, whatever they may think in their hearts of hearts. So I think we must discount the Swiss experience as being probably irrelevant. Much more important is the system that he operates within in North Korea. And that seems to be a continuation, but with slightly new characteristics
Alexander, Kim Jong-un, he is being watched very closely as far as we can from London, from Seoul, from Washington. I'm guessing he's also being observed from Moscow. What's the perspective over there, and what does the new leadership of North Korea mean for relations between Russia and Pyongyang?
First of all, I would like to mention that Kim Jong-un managed to establish his own chain of command much faster than everybody expected, and the recent North Korean-American agreement testifies to the fact. Everybody expected that he will spend much more time on consolidating his power base and so forth. But generally, however, in the future, he is unlikely to share power with somebody else. He, like his father, after Kim Il-sung's death, would rule alone, but with active support from of those people who had been elected to the senior party and governing position thanks to Kim Jong-il. A number of signs, especially the numerous personnel changes during 2009-2011, indicated that deceased leader tried to carefully align the balance of powers among top officials as well as among top party and governing bodies. We expect that these officials, which remain mainly the same from Kim Jong-il era, will continue generally the political course was pursued by deceased leader, and we don't expect any drastic changes in this course, especially towards Russia and China, because the experience testify very well, very convincingly to North Korean leaders that when hard times come, the only two countries they can turn to for some political support, even I would say for some defense, remain China and Russia.
Jonas, I'm going to bring it back to the studio now. Do you have any observations on the new Kim? And do you think that now he's taken this leadership role, he's looking a little bit further into Asia at Myanmar, which has been another pariah nation of the continent, but is been making some kind of democratic reforms, slightly improving its human rights record, and has been receiving rewards from the West?
Yes and no. I think there's some interesting parallels with Burma and Myanmar, but the main difference being there was an opposition with a very well-known figure in Aung San Suu Kyi, and there's nothing similar in North Korea. So meaning that what Kim Jong-un is taking over is to hold military and security apparatus of North Korea, and there is nothing there you can say immediately that could warrant that you undertake quite large changes. And what he's been doing now has actually only been reaching out to the US and making this sort of first preliminary deal. It's not been any sort of changes on the internal front, and that we haven't seen. I think, like others, the main interesting thing has been that he's actually seemed to be quite quickly, firmly in power, whereas some of us maybe thought that succession came a bit rushed and not that planned. Apparently, maybe it has been relatively sort of both well carried out, and some of the internal changes before paving the way for his full leadership.
I think that rather than looking at Myanmar, they were probably looking back to Libya and thinking, we're not going to let that happen here.
Another couple of things that could have been influencing them. Do you think the ruling elite of North Korea has been spooked by the Arab Spring? You mentioned Libya. Another issue has been, well, they've struck this deal. They're going to be taking 240,000 tons of food. But what does that say about life inside North Korea? Are they still facing food shortages that were linked to the famine that cost something like 1 million lives back in the 1990s? Mark?
Year on and year out, North Korea has a shortage of food production. They can't meet the nutritional needs of the people. Every year they're about 900,000 tons short. So they always need food from the outside. The question is, why can't they buy it themselves? Why don't they reduce their military spending and buy food? So they always have to, go around and ask for aid. I think the key thing about this deal is that his father initiated it. In December before his death, Kim Jong-il started the negotiations with the United States. So the son, Kim Jong-un, can say he's just following his father's dying wish. That's the most important factor here.
You're listening to the Voice of Russia in London. I'm James Reinl with a special debate on nuclear weapons and North Korea. I'm joined by Mark Fitzpatrick from a research group called the International Institute for Strategic Studies, Jonas Parello-Plesner from a think tank called the European Hoare, a former British envoy to Pyongyang, and on the Moscow by Alexandr Djebin, a Korea expert at the Russian Academy of Sciences. We don't have that much time left on the show, so we'll only have one more round for each of you. Maybe to you first, Alexandr, because you were raising the issue of Iran earlier, and I think it would be interesting to find out if there's anything that we can learn about the way that the West has been treating North Korea and the possible diplomatic breaks that we may now be at, and compare that to this impasse we have over Iran's alleged nuclear weapons program.
First of all, I think that it is very difficult to achieve some kind of drastic breakthrough between the United States and North Korea. We saw already some examples of very brave or bold moves on both sides, like Madeleine Albright, State Secretary, visiting Pyongyang in 2000, and Chomin Rock, Kim Jong-un special envoy, visiting Washington. It was absolutely unprecedented steps in relations between two countries, but they led to nothing. And I don't think any sense for North Korea to make some drastic change in relations with both South Korea or United States because of presidential elections in United States and South Korea. And North Koreans knew very well that new presidents can drastically change their course. It happened in South Korea when Lee Myung-bak came after Roh Moo-hyun, and it's the same was in United States in case with United States when Bush came after the Clinton. So this year, it will be a year of small steps. Maybe in sense of propaganda, it will be a little bit ballooned, but actually, I don't think that both sides are ready to make something strategic.
Okay, like I say, we don't have much time left, but perhaps we could just talk a little bit more about Iran and North Korea.
You know, one big difference here is that North Korea was willing to suspend activity that was of grave concern to the region and the rest of the world, the testing and the uranium enrichment program. That's what has been asked of Iran all this time, but Iran is absolutely not going to stop it. It's made it perfectly clear. The question is, can there be some kind of an interim measure like there was with North Korea that could get some process of negotiation going? Can Iran agree to make some small, at least gesture of confidence building, such as stopping the production of 20% enriched uranium, if not all of the uranium? I think if they were ready to do that, the United States would be ready to try something itself. It's a very difficult environment in Washington. It's even more difficult in Tehran. One of the advantages Kim Jong-un has is he doesn't have to deal with any kind of a democratic system. If he and his uncle make a decision, that's the decision. Much easier.
Jonas, final comment.
Yeah, no, I would agree there is that possibility and hopefully a parallel to Iran to sort of say, could there be also some slight moves as the ones that Mark's sketched out. It will take, I think it's important to say that all these, even if there are deals, will be all the time step by step. I mean, that's been, when we look back, the way the North Koreans have been going through this. So even if you think you might have a sort of part of it further down the road, a larger deal, there will still be, if we go back and look at the way actually Bush's latest negotiator, Christopher Hill, actually did a quite good deal with the North Koreans and then thought it was all there, but then it all ended in the detail on the verification of how to do this. And so it means there will be many sort of the steps ahead, and it's really in these details that the negotiations are made or broken.
That was Jonas Parello-Plesner from a think tank called the European Council on Foreign Relations, suggesting there's a parallel opportunity for resolving nuclear stalemates with Iran and North Korea. I was also joined by Mark Fitzpatrick from a research group called the International Institute for Strategic Studies, Jim Hoare, a former British envoy to Pyongyang, and on the line from Moscow by Alexandr Djebin, a Korea expert at the Russian Academy of Sciences. You're listening to the Voice of Russia in London. I'm James Reinl. Stay tuned. We'll be back shortly.